Fear, or being afraid, is interesting, especially in anime and manga. Fear brings a sort of realistic tone no matter how fantastical the story is. This gives birth to some of my favorite scenes. For example, when Killua not going out because he knew they were going to die if they fought back against P2, it had my anxiety levels to the max, in a good way. This was a great scene for various reasons like tension and the actions fitting the characters perfectly, but the aspect of fear is at the center. And fear is an emotion that everyone can relate to. However, in today's society, being afraid is usually looked down upon. Being afraid is seen as weak and an obstacle to overcome. And so, this is reflected in the media we all consume. And it is no different in anime and manga. Fear is usually shown as, like I said before, an obstacle, or in some stories, a comedic device. I like my fair share of both uses, but I have one small issue when fear is portrayed as an obstacle. When a character becomes fearless, I feel like a sense of reason is thrown out the window. Of course, this can lead to some interesting scenes that I adore, but it isn't exactly realistic. Now, entertainment doesn't need to be realistic, but when it does have those small details, it does hit harder. And a manga that captures the true nature of fear and being fearless is Vagabond. Vagabond is a beautiful manga based off of the novel titled Musashi, an epic that follows Miyamoto Musashi, originally named Takuzo, as he strives to become the greatest swordsman, invincible under the heavens. As you can imagine, the manga displays battles and settings in great detail. Aside from the wonderfully crafted duels, it also offers a tremendous amount of philosophy and life lessons. As Musashi travels Japan, he learns more than just the way of the sword. He learns about himself, what keeps him going, how he feels about others, and what his purpose is. The lessons he learns vary, but as you can tell from the intro, I want to speak on his lesson with fear. After an intense and humbling experience at the Yoshioka school, Musashi and his newly found disciple Jotaro arrive at the Hozoin Temple. Though previously humbled, Musashi is still as confident as ever, and his current goal is to defeat the head of the temple, Ine. As he arrives, he meets a strange old man. As he approaches him, he senses danger even though the old man is just farming. Here Musashi's bloodlust is so intense that it envisions the old man attacking Jotaro. The old man informs Musashi of his bloodlust and how he doesn't have true strength. Now curious, Musashi confronts the old man and speaks with him more. As they talk about what strength truly is, a man by the name of Gion Toji, who is also a swordsman from the Yoshioka dojo, is on the hunt for Musashi for what he did at said dojo. He is unaware of Musashi's whereabouts, but he does know that he'll show up at the Hozoin Temple. So every day he goes to the temple awaiting his arrival, and even challenges the warriors of the temple. This soon gained the attention of Inshin, a man we'll meet very soon. The day after Musashi's encounter with the old man, he heads to the temple where he fights a Hozoin warrior and meets Gion Toji again. The two have a short fight, and here we see the first signs of Musashi's weakness. He begins to fight confident as ever, yet when he goes for the first strike, he withdraws. Perhaps he felt as if the single strike would lead to his demise. Fear has spared him. But before their bout can continue, Inshin charges in to break them up and check on his fallen comrade. This is when both Gion Toji and Musashi learn that Ine is no longer the head of the temple. Inshin is now the current head, and he's probably stronger than him. And even though Musashi has such a close call with Gion Toji, he's confident that he'll beat Inshin. And his weakness shows itself again. And this time, he doesn't hesitate with his strikes. Instead, he attacks wildly, lacking style and grace, and Inshin takes full advantage, responding back with coordinated attacks and graceful dodges. Musashi is simply unmatched, and yet he still fights. Resorting to outlandish and foul tactics, he can't win, but he keeps going, pushes his body to its limits. Inshin even mentions that it feels like he's putting his life behind every attack. But eventually, it gets to the point where Inshin realizes that he'll have to kill Musashi to end the battle. And when Musashi has to face such a fate, he blacks out. He soon wakes up back at the old man's house, covered in bandages. He's lost and confused. The last thing he remembers is his intense duel. But before he can regain himself, Jotaro walks in, looking at him in a disgusted manner, stating he no longer wants to be his student, and leaves. The old man informs Musashi of what happened once he blacked out. He was still fighting, but after being struck twice in almost fatal areas, he ran, spared by fear once again. Prior to this event, the thought of dying in battle never really crossed Musashi's mind. I mean, how could it? All his past opponents were simply fodder to him, with the exception of the Yoshioka brothers. Musashi was overconfident with his fight against the Yoshioka brothers, but not once did he think he'd meet his end. He even had Yoshioka Denshichiro in a deadlock, but this time it was different. He wasn't fighting a swordsman. This time he had to go against the spear, a long-range weapon that's hard to maneuver around. He was unfamiliar with the weapon and became overwhelmed and didn't see himself coming out alive, and so he ran. Not only did Musashi learn the truth about his fight, the old man reveals that he is in fact an A. This absolutely crushes his spirits, and he can't hold back the tears. He can't even defeat a disciple, and yet he came strolling into the village thinking he'll be able to defeat the head with ease. He's weak, and he knows it. He is nothing more than a tiny speck in the vast world of strong warriors. When his wounds heal, he begs Ine to train him. The goal is simple: overcome fear. It is fear that briefly saved him from going Toji, but it is also a fear that disrupted his fighting capabilities against Enshin. His training would have him living in the woods, meditating under a waterfall, and sparring with Ine. Meanwhile, Enshin is bored out of his mind. He found an unmatched thrill in his fight with Musashi, and can't seem to shake the empty feeling. That is, until he hears about Musashi's training in the woods. If a rematch is what Musashi wants, he'll give it to him. When the time finally arrives for the rematch, Musashi has grown a lot. He's not confident, but he's not anxious either. For about 5 chapters, Musashi and Enshin stare each other down, awaiting each other's move. The silence finally breaks with Enshin screaming and striking first, similar to what Musashi did in their first match. He strikes wildly, putting his life behind every attack, and Musashi can sense it. Not only that, their fight is in the woods, a second home to Musashi, so he clearly has the advantage. Enshin started to get overwhelmed and became the one who was afraid, resulting in his loss. This entire arc was fantastic, and it perfectly showcases the duality of fear. In some cases, it can spare us from utter defeat, or worse, death. But in other cases, it is nothing more than a barricade, stopping us from becoming the best versions of ourselves. And this lesson is brought up once again in Kojiro's flashback. When Takyon met a young Kojiro, he realized that the boy lacked a sense of fear and danger. With no sense of a threat, it is easy to let harm get a grasp on you. And so, he gives the young Kojiro a taste of what danger lies ahead of him. This eventually comes back around to become an obstacle for Kojiro to overcome. In short, there's a man who rules Kojiro's village with fear tactics, and when Kojiro is faced against him, he has to build the courage to fight back. And I love this because it all relates back to real life as well. There are times where my cautiousness saved me from some horrible consequences, but there are even more countless times where I have decided to withdraw from some actions because I was just too scared and immediately realized I wasted a huge opportunity. So of course, I enjoyed watching these characters learn these lessons. If it isn't clear by now, Vagabond is one of my favorite manga series, only competing with the likes of One Piece and JoJo. I really recommend it if you enjoy great action, philosophy, sword fights, and masterclass artwork. And if you like this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing if you like this type of content. So I haven't uploaded in a long time, and I know I don't really have any fans right now, but it isn't exactly healthy to be this inconsistent. So from now on, I will try to upload once every 2 weeks. But alongside that, there's a new approach I want to try out with my videos, and I hope you all like it.